Hi, I'm Charles with AniCap. This is my recap for the anime Berserk of Gluttony. If you like my recaps, please consider subscribing. The story begins as a masked man fights several monsters. He demonstrates exceptional strength but is unsatisfied and wants more. We then watch as a man on a carriage is attacked by the same goblins and cries for help. Luckily for him, a couple of warriors arrive and the man is glad to be saved. The warriors easily defeat several of them, but there are hundreds more. This isn't a problem though, as they have more members in their group and proclaim that they will defeat all the monsters. Afterwards, we meet our protagonist named Fate, whose stomach growls from hunger. The band of warriors make their triumphant return and Fate hears them talking about their success. Fate states that he could never go goblin hunting like them since he is completely useless, and he has a stomach that never stops growling. Fate explains that he blames all his misfortune on his useless skill called Gluttony. He reminds himself to be grateful though, as at least he has a job. Sometime later, everyone marvels as the Holy Knights make their way through the town. They are a trio of Valeric siblings. A man then fears for his life as he accidentally drops some food that touches one of them, and the one named Hato questions what the peasant is doing. The peasant begins to answer, but Hato becomes furious that the man is speaking to him. The peasant begins to apologize, but this makes them even more mad. They warn that anyone that insults the Holy Knights will have their heads cut off. They decide to leave, but tell the man that he is lucky to still be alive. Everyone is upset to watch this happen, but no one is brave enough to do anything about it. At the castle, Fate is glad that the day is almost over and exclaims that it's almost time to go home. The knights make their way to the castle where they ask Fate if he thinks he has done a good job filling in for them. Fate thinks he has, so Raphael gives him his pay. As if throwing it on the ground wasn't bad enough, they make him pick it up in front of them too. Hato very clearly steps on Fate's hand on purpose, but mockingly apologizes as he states that Fate was so filthy that he didn't notice him. Fate's stomach begins to growl at the most awkward moment, and Raphael points out how disgusting Fate is. The knights are furious since the growling makes it seem like they don't pay him enough, and they beat him relentlessly. Fate thinks about how in this world, there are haves and there are have-nots. What separates them are the special powers bestowed by the gods, their skills. The knights keep treating him like a punching bag and explain that he owes his livelihood to them. Someone with a worthless skill like his is only earning money thanks to the grace of holy knights like them. They tell him that he should be grateful, and when he slacks off, it reflects poorly on them. They demand that he get on his feet, but only to knock him back down. They believe he needs to be taught a lesson and explain that defiant dogs need strict discipline. Just then, they are told to stop, since inflicting that kind of abuse on citizens they have sworn to protect is not an act of a holy knight. The girl talking is named Roxy, and she explains that watching the gate is an honorable duty for a holy knight. A duty that should be their responsibility. The knights consider it a difference of opinion, but decide that it's best to leave. Roxy helps the beaten down loser, but he notices Raphael giving him the dirtiest look. Roxy cleans him up and tells him that helping him is no problem since they are the same when it comes to watching gates. Furthermore, this is how a holy knight like herself should conduct themselves. She takes over guarding the gate and tells Fate to tell her if anything like this happens again. Instead of accepting the gesture like a normal person, Fate just tells her that he is used to it and leaves. Afterward, we see why he said that as he thinks about how Raphael is, and there's no telling what he might do. It turns out that Fate isn't a complete loser, as he is just trying to protect Roxy and doesn't want to risk getting her involved. The bartender explains to Fate that if he keeps letting the knights treat him that way, he's going to end up like the last guy. There's only one outcome for that, and it's a nasty one. On his way home, Fate curses how his stomach is still growling, even though he just ate an entire meal. He condemns his gluttony skill and wishes he could have been born with something worthwhile. He is not asking to be a holy knight, and he would take being a warrior or even a merchant or a craftsman. However, there's no changing how things are. He states that when you have nothing, you're just trapped as a loser. Just then, Fate notices some thieves attacking someone, and the wimp's first thought is to get Roxy. He tells her what's going on, and she leaves the useless loser to take over her spot as a guard. He seems to just be okay with this and just stands by while he hears her beat up the thieves. Just then, one of the thieves begins to run towards Fate, and his cowardly instincts immediately tell him to run away. However, Fate stops himself and thinks about how Roxy trusted him with guarding the gate, and if he runs, it'll cause trouble for her. Fate then fights against every cowardly bone in his body to prepare to battle. He notices that the thief is already injured and only now becomes confident that he can stop him. Fate lets out a scream, giving his best impression of a brave warrior, and makes a hole right in the thief's chest. Just then, a voice states that his gluttony skill has been activated, and his stats will now increase. Fate can't understand what's happening, and the voice states that the skills Identify and Telepathy have been added. Fate has never been more confused in his life, just as Roxy returns from the fight. Of course, she is concerned for his life since he is so weak, but Fate notices something strange. He heard words coming from her, but her lips didn't move, and it was almost like he could hear her inner voice. He explains that he is okay, and it happens again. She states that she has to report everything, but Fate is shocked to see that he can't hear it anymore. He tells her that she can take credit for his kill, since he is sure it would cause problems for him if Raphael found out. Roxy wanted to give him credit, but as a show of gratitude, she settles on offering him a job working for her family. He initially tries to decline, but she doesn't listen, and asks him if he intends to serve the Valerics until it kills him. Fate begins to consider it and thinks about the two paths. On one side is a future where he is treated like trash all the time, and on the other side, he can work for Roxy. Fate is concerned that if he leaves, then the person that replaces him will just get treated like trash instead. However, Roxy tells him to stop thinking so much and just ignore that very good point he made. Fate listens to her advice and agrees to work for her family. That night, Fate sits on his sorry excuse for a bed in his bedroom that looks like a prison and shockingly realizes that all his stats are now in the triple digits. His new skills are also a mystery, but he realizes that he must have been using telepathy. He has no clue what is happening to his body, but grows confident as he might now be able to beat monsters with his new stats. The next day, Fate searches for a sword, but the merchant is disappointed to see that he is poor. The merchant shoos him away as Fate thinks about how it's been 5 years since he came to the royal capital, and 2 silver coins are everything he has been able to save up by working. All hope isn't lost, however, as the merchant tells him that he can still afford the trash weapons he keeps in a barrel. The merchant turns his back, giving Fate the perfect opportunity to take whatever he wants, but Fate decides to just look in the barrel instead. While doing so, he uses his new Identify skill to read the stats of all the barrel weapons. They all have 0 for both durability and strength, but one sword captures his eye. It's filthy and has been treated like trash, so Fate can't help but notice how he has those qualities as well. Just then, Fate is shocked as he hears the words "Hey you" come from the sword. The sword, named Greed, states that it will make it worth his while and tells Fate to just hurry up and buy him. Greed knows about Fate's gluttony, and it says it's because they have a lot in common. Fate leaves his only 2 coins and happily takes his new talking sword. Elsewhere, the Valerics talk about how Roxy is apparently trying to hire Fate for the Hart household without even asking them. The girl named Memo wants to teach her what happens when someone defies the Valeric family, but Raphael points out that nobodies like Fate can easily be replaced. Besides that, the Harts and the Valerics are part of the 5 great families that support the kingdom, and there's no point in complicating that now. Raphael heads to the military district, prompting Memo to ask what he plans to study this time. He shocks her though, as he plans to study how to become immortal. Sometime later, Fate walks with his talking sword, and it warns him that something is approaching. A goblin appears from nowhere, but Fate is now able to destroy it. Doing so activates his gluttony skill again, and his stats are increased even more. This time, the skill's strength boost has been added. Greed then has a good laugh as Fate is in great trouble when hundreds of goblins appear. However, Fate seems like a completely new person as he slices through several of the goblins. After every single elimination, his gluttony skill is activated, and he just keeps going. The words "gluttony skill activated" are repeated hundreds of times as Fate finishes off all the goblins, and he is shocked to see that his stats have increased to a crazy amount. Greed points out that Fate must be full now, and Fate notices that his stomach hasn't growled even once that day, which has never happened before. Fate is completely confused though, since he was under the impression that people were born with the only skills they would ever have. Greed points out that this is true, but Fate's gluttony skill makes him different. Normally, stats increase from battles, and based on one's experience, their level goes up. However, the gluttony skill steals stats and other skills, at the cost of not benefiting from experience. Fate begins to understand and realizes that that must be why he is still level 1. Greed then surprises Fate as he explains that he knows this because they are the same. Just then, they notice the band of warriors approaching, and Greed tells Fate that his gluttony skill isn't the kind of thing he wants other people finding out about. It's one of the skills that defy divine law. Fate determines that he must do his fighting alone, but Greed reminds him that he has him now, and Fate will never be alone again. Fate is glad that Greed has accepted him as his master, but Greed tells him to calm down with all the master talk. Just before they leave, Greed reminds him to take the goblin ears so Fate can get paid. Afterward, Fate collects his reward and thinks about all the food he wants to get, but Greed reminds him that his maintenance comes first. Greed wants to be treated like the gem he is, but Fate thinks he is seeing himself too highly. The sword explains though that they don't call him Greed for nothing. Just then they run into a man, and a little girl that's with him asks for help. Fate uses Identify to see this man's threat level in case he just wants to ignore the whole thing, but finds that he has a skill that allows him to hide his stats from the Identify skill. This means there's no telling what this guy is capable of. Greed wonders what he will do, and Fate shows that he is a completely different person now, as he states that they can't just ignore the girl's cry for help. They follow him, and the scummy guy tells the girl that she will serve as a slave to the Holy Knights. Greed points out that the guy is pretty tough and tells Fate that this is his last chance to turn back. As he prepares to fight, Fate thinks about how he finally has some power now, and if someone's suffering in front of him, he wants to help them with it. Elsewhere, a woman of the church speaks to a bunch of sad, parentless children. Instead of trying to find them some parents, the nun tells them about the Holy Laplace, the creator of their world. When Laplace departed the world, she gifted the people special powers known as skills. The children, probably wishing she would have gifted them some parents, can only eat if they give their thanks, so they do. One kid is super edgy though. He doesn't stuff his face like the others, and explains that the Holy Laplace doesn't play fair. The Holy Knights and Warriors have amazing skills, but he has such a weak one, and his weak skill is probably why both his parents haven't come back from getting the milk. The woman of the cloth explains that in the old times, when Holy Laplace protected the world, there were no skills or stats, nor did monsters exist. Back then, everyone was equal. This sounds like heaven to the unwanted child, and he wishes that he had been born back then. Just then, another nun arrives and frantically explains that she can't find one of their missing orphans. She leaves to continue her search, and the other nun sighs as she wonders where the girl named Sahara has gone. Back near Fate, we see that Sahara is actually the girl he followed. The kidnapper lets out his frustrations on a steel beam and leaves, probably because that hurt a lot and he doesn't want to admit it. However, this gives our boy the opportunity he has been waiting for to rescue the girl. Unfortunately, the bad guy was standing right there, and compares Fate to all the other foolish heroes that challenge him out of some misguided notion of justice. The despicable villain points out that Fate has no chance of beating him, especially while protecting the girl. Fate wants to get her to safety, but he doesn't even know where that would be. Luckily, Greed has an idea and tells Fate to back away. The bandana-loving bad guy thinks Fate is weaker than him, so Greed thinks that they can take advantage of his overconfidence. The bad guy chases them and points out that if he kills Fate in front of the girl, then she will never disobey him again. Greed is somehow able to sense the man and tells Fate to knock over some boxes, and Fate faces the man head on. Greed becomes concerned when the man uses his sharp edge skill and instructs Fate to just strike him down through his sword. Fate does just that as he uses Greed to just slice right through everything it touches, and Fate demands an explanation from Bandana Man. The man refuses to tell Fate which Holy Knight had him kidnap the girl, so Fate resorts to good old-fashioned torture. The man can't take the excruciating pain any longer and reveals that it was Hato. A quick scene then shows how evil Hato is as he uses orphans to help him with his target practice. Fate managed to save the girl though and finds that her stomach is grumbling. They formally introduce themselves and go to get some food. Apparently the girl has never eaten before as she tries to bite food that is clearly scalding hot, and Fate reminds her to be careful. Sahara cries as it actually turns out that she has never eaten meat before, so Fate gives her his too. Later, Fate takes her back to the orphanage and is surprised when he is thanked for the first time in his entire life. Fate explains that he has weak skill just like she does, and all it does is make him hungry. Even though Fate seemingly hated his own life just the day before, he thinks he has turned into some sort of life coach and gives Sahara some advice. He states that no matter how hard things get, if you can laugh them off, one day you'll find happiness. These words actually turn out to be that of his father. Back then, he didn't understand, but his father telling him that helped him make it to this point. The self-help guru states that this is why he wants Sahara to survive too, and he leaves. A quick look at his stats shows that Fate is progressing rapidly, and Greed congratulates him on learning his first technical skill, the one-handed sword technique, Sharp Edge. This is a big deal since with technical skills, he gets tech arts, which are like secret techniques. This specific one allows Fate to attack twice in the space of one strike. That's the sharp edge Bandana Man was going to use, so Fate would have been in big trouble if he did. Greed calls Fate a hero, but our humble protagonist states that he isn't one, and if he had known about the sharp edge attack, he wouldn't have risked it. Greed points out that the truth is, battles come down to luck of the moment. There is no guarantee the stronger person will always win, so Fate realizes that luck must have been on his side. Fate thinks to himself that he wants to get stronger, strong enough that he can win without getting lucky. Just then, Greed reminds him that his first day of working for the Hearts will be the next day, and Fate screams in agony as he remembers that he didn't buy any clothes. At a bar, a man explains that someone named Sir Mason was struck down by a divine dragon. It is uncertain what will happen to the Hart family, but it's likely that Roxy will succeed him. Unfortunately, Mr. Mason was the one keeping the Holy Knights from going completely out of control, and the old man is not sure that even Lady Roxy can keep them in line. The drunk asks about Fate, and the bartender explains that he used to drop by after work every day. The next day, Fate is amazed as it's his first time in the Knights District. The Hart family estate is just as amazing, and Roxy arrives to greet him. Fate is taken aback by her appearance, and she compliments him on how well he cleans up. With that awkward interaction out of the way, Roxy brings him into another one by introducing Fate to her recently deceased father. She explains that he was taken out 5 days ago by a divine dragon in Gallia. Fate thinks about how Gallia is a continent that's dominated by monsters. One of the Holy Knight's major duties is keeping them contained. Roxy explains that the duty fell to the Hart family this year. A dangerous task, but not one that should have been deadly. However, a divine dragon that hadn't left its lair in over 1,000 years killed her father's entire force. Fate is in disbelief as he realizes that Roxy looked out for him these past few days even though she was dealing with the loss of her father. She doesn't want him to be sad though. She is the head of the house now and wants them to work together to make it a joyful place. They go to shake hands, but Fate knows that it will activate his telepathy, so he points at some random person. Haru is the chief maid, and she asks Fate to make sure he conducts himself in a manner befitting a servant of the Hart family. Fate agrees but seems to completely forget that as he shovels food into his mouth like he's preparing for a hibernation he didn't tell anyone about. A week later, Fate works so hard that the other servants tell him to get some rest. They reveal that he thought he was a bit strange since they always see him talking to his sword and he was shaking when he ate meat. Fate's stomach growls very loudly in front of them and they can't believe it since they all just ate. Fate is called to meet with Roxy, but his stomach continues to growl and not even Fate understands what's going on. Roxy tries to have a conversation with him, but Fate can only think about how he's strangely just getting hungrier and hungrier. He fears he won't be able to hold back any longer, but Roxy snaps him out of it. The two relate over their dead fathers since Fate's father died in a monster hunt as well. Roxy calls Fate family, but he wants to be something more. Before he can tell her though, she denies his request, and even more surprisingly, Fate begins to faint. Later, Fate wakes up in his room with a note from Roxy telling him to take the day off. Fate asks Greed what's going on with him since his hunger has never been this bad, and he can't hold himself together anymore. Greed reveals that once the Gluttony skill gets a taste of souls, there's no stopping it. The more Fate devours, the stronger he will get, and the more he devours, the more he will want. Fate is destined to seek out souls to consume until the day he dies. Fate wonders what will happen if he doesn't, and is horrified to hear that he will starve to death, or lose control and start attacking anyone in his path. Fate can't believe that as it makes him sound like some kind of monster. Greed gives him a tip though. He tells Fate that when his hunger approaches its limit, it will show in his eyes. Greed reiterates Fate's life has completely changed and there's no turning back now. Fate heads outside and walks past a group of people. Our hungry hero is shocked to realize that they smell delicious for some reason, and Greed explains that it's because his hunger boost has kicked in. It's what his red eyes indicate and is a temporary power that enables effective use of the Gluttony skill. During this time, Fate will have better night vision, be able to track prey by scent, and weaker prey will be terrified and paralyzed. This makes sense as they go outside the kingdom and find several goblins terrified. Our once innocent and frail hero is a completely different person now, as he helps himself to a massacre. With that group finished, they head to the Hobgoblin Forest. Fate continues the massacre but seems to become upset as he wonders how much more he needs before he is free from his hunger. Hours pass and Greed points out that it's over. Fate hopes to never feel like that again, so Greed tells him that he will have to hunt monsters every now and then and feed souls to Gluttony. Just then, Fate is shocked to see that a Goblin King has appeared. It doesn't have much of an edge on him stat-wise, but it does have a health regeneration skill. It heals wounds, and with it, Fate would be able to keep fighting even if he got injured. Our boy definitely wants some of that good Deadpool power and goes after the Goblin King. Fate gets disgusted though as the goblin devours a human, and Greed coldly points out that humans are a fine meal for monsters. Fate manages to get the drop on the giant troll, but freezes for a moment when he sees the human body. The fight continues, but Greed becomes frustrated that Fate is only dodging. Fate is concerned about getting attacked, but Greed tells him to trust him, and so he does. They manage to land the final blow, and Fate is glad to see that his stats have gone up even more. The skill Health Regeneration has also been added, but Fate is exhausted now. Greed then reveals that with Fate's current stats, he will be able to access Greed's first level, so he can achieve another form. All Fate has to do is hand over his stats as an offering to him. With his new form, Greed will be able to provide Fate with new functions. This sounds pretty awesome, so Fate would like to give it a try, but is shocked when Greed reveals that he will have to give him all the stats he has gained since they met. Fate is of course hesitant, but Greed points out that his name is Greed after all. Fate is still hesitant, so Greed reveals that if he doesn't unlock it, he will lose the right to wield him. Greed points out that Fate can get stronger on his own, or he can make him strong too, so they can work together. Fate determines that he doesn't have much of a choice, and Greed is the only partner for him. Greed tells him that he won't regret it and begins the process. It's a grand sight, and Fate can feel the power leaving him. With the process complete, Greed reveals that his new form is a magic bow. Some dumb goblin shows up at the absolute worst possible moment for him, and Greed instructs Fate to draw on the bow as the magical arrows will appear on their own. It's an amazing bow as Fate can aim wherever and his arrow will always land. Afterwards, Fate takes some goblin ears and leaves them on the doorsteps of the church, which I'm sure they will love to find first thing in the morning. Later, our heroic protagonist stops an intruder, but is shocked to find that it's actually Roxy dressed like a peasant. Fate wonders if she's really planning to go to the castle just like a normal old nobody, so she decides to tell him a secret since he has already seen her. She's going into town on a secret inspection. Roxy asks him not to tell anyone and imagines what Haru would say if she found out. Fate promises to not say a word, so she thanks him, but she also has the brilliant idea to have him accompany her as her escort. Fate is already a peasant, so he doesn't need a disguise, and they head into town. Fate keeps calling her milady, so Greed must remind him to stop, since people will notice. Roxy reminds him as well, prompting Greed to make a snide remark. Fate tells Greed to shut up, but Roxy thinks he was talking to her, so Fate just changes the subject. Roxy tells him to call her Lexi, and Greed can't help but make another remark, this time about how she couldn't think of a more creative name. Fate tells Greed to shut up again, causing the clueless Roxy to apologize to Fate for being so annoying. Fate urgently explains that it was just a misunderstanding, and Roxy, trying to act like she didn't just reject our boy very recently, says that she was excited to be going into town with him. The sarcastic sword makes yet another remark, causing Fate to threaten him, but Roxy stops him as she doesn't want anyone being so rough with their weapon. She realizes that she has never had a good look at his sword, and Fate hesitates to show her. This is really bad since someone with a worthless skill like his wouldn't normally have a sword, and she might think it's weird. Not to mention how monstrous his Gluttony skill is. He remembers Greed's words explaining how once it gets a taste of souls there's no stopping it, and how if he doesn't feed it he will lose control and start attacking anyone in his path. Fate determines that he can't let her learn about his Gluttony skill, but Butterfingers drops his sword and Roxy takes a closer look. She doesn't seem to learn anything from it, but tells Fate that it does need some maintenance. Roxy then flexes super hard as she offers to take him to the Hart family's personal blacksmith later. Fate tells Greed to be happy since he will be getting all fixed up, but Greed is completely silent. Fate wonders what is wrong, but is shocked when his own sword tells him to shut up as he is basking in the moment. Greed says he is still in heaven after smelling Roxy's scent, so Fate decides that he might just have to throw Greed around after all. They finally make it to the very busy town. Roxy finds some grapes and the merchant explains that they were picked from the Hart family's vineyard. Even though it's her vineyard that she can just eat from directly, she decides to try one. Fate is amazed by the taste, prompting the cocky Roxy to brag about how those grapes are grown at home. The merchant hears this, and just seconds into their mission, it seems like she has already blown their cover. However, Greed gives Fate an idea, and our hero saves the day by explaining that Lexi has a relative that works there. Roxy is impressed by his quick thinking, but Greed tells Fate that he owes him one. Just then, the crowd gets all flustered as some holy knights are approaching. The crowd is surprised to see a holy knight in the market, and think about how these types of things have started to happen only after Sir Mason died. At the worst possible moment, Fate's stomach begins to growl, causing the holy knight to become furious. Fate doesn't want to cause a commotion, so he decides to just apologize. His apology isn't enough for the Holy Knight though. This Holy Knight has some serious issues as he wants to embarrass Fate for some reason. He tries to step on Fate, but Roxy stops him. The Holy Knight turns his attention to the peasant girl, but begins to recognize her. The crowd thinks the same as they wonder if she is Lady Roxy. Greed comes up with a brilliant idea to have Fate pretend they are a couple. He explains that if Fate gets really clingy, no one will think it's Lady Roxy. Our boy is shocked to hear such a bold idea, but Roxy hears him repeat it, and thinks it's genius. She grabs our hero and they pretend to bicker about him not eating the breakfast she made him. The incredibly awkward interaction seems to get the job done, as everyone is cringing too hard to say anything, allowing the two to get away. Just then, Fate realizes that he can hear Roxy's thoughts, and she thinks about how she has never locked arms with a boy before. She thinks about how fast her heart is racing, causing our boy to panic. Roxy decides that they need to keep moving, and Fate begins to think that escorting Lady Roxy might be a bit too tough for him. Moments later, Roxy feeds into a stereotype as she explains that she is a girl, so of course she would be interested in an absurdly gigantic gem. There are also some ores there which may or may not have gems in them. Fate uses Identify to cheat and see if there's a gem in one, but Greed tells him to be careful since merchants hate people that can use Identify. Apparently, Roxy couldn't care less about those stupid ores as she's just looking at more gems. Fate is amazed since at this moment, Roxy just seems like a normal girl, not a holy knight. The merchant offers them a discount so Fate can buy something for his girl, but he just gets embarrassed and Roxy decides that she has no use for gems anyway. Roxy moves on quickly to ask if Fate knows any active warriors, since she has some questions for them. Luckily for them, they overhear some guys talking about all the dead goblins that were recently found. Rumor is that it's a wandering monster that did it. The problem with that though is that it doesn't explain how the orphanage in the slums had Goblin King ears donated to it. Unfortunately for Roxy, they don't have any more information, so she asks Fate to take her where warriors gather. Fate realizes that this is actually what her inspection is about, and she reveals that she's investigating the wandering monster said to have appeared around the capital lately. Fate is at a loss for words since he is actually this wandering monster, and Greed makes another smart aleck remark about how interesting of a twist this is. Fate heads to the bar he used to go to, where the bartender doesn't even recognize him at first. The bartender is surprised to see that Fate is still alive, but even more stunned to see that he has a girlfriend now. Fate worries that Roxy might be getting offended by people calling her his girlfriend, and Greed points out that she might even have Fate executed for it. I guess Roxy was flustered too as she absolutely destroys a cup, but the bartender says it's okay since it happens all the time. Greed tells Fate that she was probably feeling self-conscious around him, and this causes Fate to obliterate his cup too. Greed says that it's good since it's a sign that he's getting stronger, and the bartender says that that cup was on its last legs anyway. The carefree bartender then spills the beans as he has heard about a warrior who made a killing off of goblin corpses. This warrior went out hunting and found a mountain of goblin corpses with their ears still intact. Roxy points out that if a warrior did all that work, they wouldn't just leave a bunch of valuable corpses around, and determines that it must have been a monster that has migrated from another region. That'll be bad for business though, since a lot of business travel is done through those goblin plains. If there's some mysterious creature on the prowl, people won't want to travel there. Fate gets depressed knowing that he is to blame, but gets distracted when his old friend arrives to be startled by Fate's ghost. The old man reveals a popular theory that the roaming monster is a lich. This is very troublesome, which is why the Holy Knights will be taking direct action to deal with it. Greed is worried to hear that the Holy Knights are getting involved since he just drained all of Fate's stats, and Fate would get destroyed by them. The old man wants to know why the girl is so curious, but she isn't clever enough to think of a good answer. Fate can't help either since he is too busy thinking about how horrible things would be if Roxy joins the hunt and sees him doing his gluttony thing. Just then, some traveling warriors arrive demanding drinks and demanding that Roxy join them for some fun. Our boy springs into action, but Roxy shows she can handle her business easily. The warriors determine that only a holy knight could have that much power, and Roxy finally doesn't deny it. The bartender knew all along, but the stupid warriors are amazed to realize that it's Roxy of the Heart family, one of the 5 families supporting the king. They apologize profusely, even going as far as to give her all their money. Roxy of course rejects it and expresses shame to see that the people the Holy Knights have sworn to protect view them as objects of fear. Her father dreamed of a world where holy knights and lowly peasants could laugh together. This is a dream she shares with him. They all begin to get along, and Fate thinks that until her dreams come true, he will follow her. Sometime later, Greed enjoys being fixed up a little too much, but we see that it worked out really well as he feels like a whole new sword. Afterwards, Roxy explains that she didn't know about the hunt because it's being led by the Berserk family and they simply didn't inform her. Just then, the two hear that Hato is hurting someone. The Berserks explain that they are simply taking a lost child into their protection. Fate releases the boy as it doesn't look like protection to them, and Roxy tells the Berserks that they will take care of the boy. However, she asks Raphael why she wasn't informed about the hunt for the wandering monster. He explains that he assumed she would be too busy mourning her departed father, but she points out that she is just fine. The Berserks decide to just leave, but Hato the jerk tells Fate that he should stick to acting like the trash he is. Fate doesn't back down though, so Raphael must tell Hato to drop it. The two take the boy to find his mother, and Fate remembers when he once got lost as a kid. It was after his father died and he moved to the capital. He looks back and wonders what happened to the holy knight who looked after him back then. Just when it seems like they won't be able to find the boy's mother, she appears out of nowhere. Fate is glad but is amazed to see just how happy Roxy is to have helped the boy. The simp stares for a bit too long though and suggests that they head back home. Roxy reminds him that if they get in trouble, they will do it together, and he agrees. When they return, Fate hopes that days like this one could last forever, but he knows that just isn't possible. He asks Greed for a way to hunt monsters without Roxy finding out, and Greed can only think of one thing. He suggests a perception warping magic item. He then leads Fate to a shop to buy a mask that will make them look different to whoever sees them. Later, Fate gives Roxy one of the ores she was clearly not interested in. He thanks her for giving him a job that has allowed him to find friends that he now considers family. Fate apologizes for not being able to get her the gem she was looking at, but Roxy explains that she's actually really happy with what he got her. This powerful beast of a woman just casually cracks the thing open with their bare hands, and Fate points out how useful his identify skill is as there's some pretty shiny stuff inside. Roxy promises to cherish it forever and wonders what she will give Fate back in return. Her ideas are a year's supply of meat or a whetstone for sharpening his sword, but Fate says none of that is necessary. However, Greed tells him to shut up and accept that whetstone since he needs to be taken care of. It seems like another happy ending, however we see that the menacing looking Raphael has gathered other knights to discuss their excursion to Gallia. Sometime later, a group of adventurers are shocked to find that the Lich got the drop on them again as all the monsters in a certain area have been eliminated. Their shock quickly turns to pants-wetting fear as these poor fools realize that the Lich that they now call Corpse is right in front of them. They run to change their underwear, and Fate thinks about how much he likes his new nickname, Corpse. Greed wonders if he is done for the day, but he isn't. Fate explains that he wants to get his stats as high as he can before the Holy Knights come after him. The next day, Fate looks like he's about to pass out from the stress of his double life shenanigans. Roxy interrupts him while he's hard at work to tell him that she has a secret mission for him. On their way there, Roxy shows him her family's land, and this guy thinks that his big secret mission will be harvesting grapes. She explains that she just wanted to show him their vineyard since he liked the grapes that one time. When they arrive at their destination, Roxy is concerned for her mother's health, but she explains that she's feeling better than usual. Roxy introduces our boy, not as her new friend or the guy that just bought her most cherished gift, but as a servant she hired, and she brought him to introduce to everyone. They greet each other and we learn that Roxy's mother's name is Aisha. Fate is glad to see that she's actually really nice, but shocked when she calls him over to ask if he likes her daughter. The two can't believe she would ask that, but Aisha makes it clear that she meant if he liked her as a boss. Our boy Fate then goes above and beyond as he declares that he cares a great deal for Roxy, and if he were allowed to, he would like to serve her until the end of his life. This is some pretty heavy stuff he is saying for someone Roxy just called her servant, so Roxy runs off to her room. Aisha tells Fate not to worry though, since Roxy has always run off whenever things got uncomfortable, just like this very awkward situation. She explains that Roxy was always a crybaby and would even throw a fit from just a glimpse of a bug. Fate points out how different that is from her cold, powerful behavior in the capital, and Aisha says that she still can't believe her little girl became a holy knight. Aisha worries about her, but Fate assures her that Roxy is a great holy knight. He tells her that the people have a lot of faith in her, and she can't help but be proud. We then see Roxy in her room with a creepy doll, and she has a memory of her father. He was proud of her becoming a holy knight, and she told him that she wanted to be the kind of holy knight he is. However, she realizes that she hasn't fulfilled her promise yet, and shamefully puts down the 3D printed action figure of him. A while later, we find that the big secret was actually to harvest grapes, and Fate takes a moment to taste some delicious juice. A man explains that the lords have personally helped cultivate this land for generations, and everyone on the property is proud to have pitched in to create this flavor. Fate seems not to care about asking sensitive questions, and asks if that includes the now dead Sir Mason. The man points out how his death must be hard on Roxy, but he is glad that she came to harvest grapes like she does every year. The man explains that she also does hunting while there, since it's harvest time for most crops, and that's when monsters called kobolds show up looking for food. He explains that the monsters come from a certain valley, but the two stop to have a laugh when our boy's stomach growls. Fate laughs on the outside, but knows that something dangerous is happening. Greed explains that after all those goblins, he is not surprised, since Fate's gluttony skill hungers for different souls. Afterwards, Roxy sends Fate home ahead of her as she has something to do. On his way home though, Fate sees a girl with a very dangerous looking weapon. This girl stops him and Fate is shocked to see that she has the same eyes he does. He tries to check her stats, but it doesn't work. The girl gives him a good look and strangely just says that it looks like she is too early. Fate tries to figure out what the heck this random chick is talking about, but she simply tells him that she originally came for the kobolds, but now he can have them. She declares that he owes her one and tells him that they will meet again. Greed says that he has no clue who that was, but Fate doesn't believe him. Fate points out how Greed always says something without him even asking, but for some strange reason, Greed is being awfully quiet now. Greed says he isn't lying and explains that there is some stuff even he, in all his greatness, doesn't know. Roxy shows up and is surprised as the white-haired girl is a galleon. Fate points out though that Gallia was destroyed. We then get a little history lesson as Professor Roxy explains that 4,000 years ago, Gallia was a great military power. But a surge in monsters caused their nation to collapse, and most of their people died. This girl is clearly a survivor though, and Roxy is amazed as she has never seen such a full-blooded galleon before. The two begin heading home, and Fate wonders if Roxy will be okay hunting the monsters on her own. Roxy explains to the overly concerned simp that she won't be alone, as the warriors who work there will be with her. On top of that, she is a holy knight, so she is certain that things will be fine. Butterfingers drops the grapes though, and the two have a good laugh. The next day, the farmers find out that the monsters had a grand old time in the vineyard. Moments later, we watch as everyone hides and prepares to get revenge on the kobolds. However, they are all shocked to see an unknown monster appear. Fate is way more hungry than shocked though, and Greed can tell that Fate's mouth must be watering. Mouth-watering at just the sight of the monster is a big problem though, as it means that time is running out. Fate realizes that he is nearly in a starvation state and panics as he can't let Roxy see him like that. He checks the monster's stats to find it's an unbelievable level 50, and it's called the Bringer of Lamentation. It's also a crowned beast, which is a powerful monster born from accumulated aggression over a long period of time. Greed says that it's nothing like the usual monsters and it's really bad news. They return to the village where everyone is panicking as they are certain that they don't have a chance against the monster. However, Roxy shows off her speech-giving skills as she calms everyone down by assuring them that she will slay the powerful beast. She tells the warriors to prepare for battle, but Greed tells Fate that they don't stand a chance. Roxy is told that the warriors need time to get ready, so they decide to wait until tomorrow to fight. Greed wants to know what the plan is, and Fate thinks about how a monster at level 50 is too much for him at the moment. However, he can't ignore the people that need his help, and can't ignore what's happening on Heart's land. More importantly though, he can't let Roxy die, and he tells Greed to get ready for battle. Later that night, Fate goes to the forest and Greed mocks him for always playing the hero. They watch the monsters walk around, and Greed explains that there are several kobold warriors around the crowned beast. Greed asks Fate what the plan is, and he simply says that he's going to fight like a glutton. He transforms Greed into his bow form and begins slaying the monsters. The stupid monsters have no clue what's happening, and we see that Fate's gluttony skill is activated after every elimination. Fate fires an arrow at the crowned beast, and this crazy thing uses one of his soldiers as a shield. Fate switches back to his sword and uses it to close the gap by slaying several monsters. His gluttony skill has been activated numerous times, and he sees that his stats have gone way up. It isn't enough to satisfy him though, so he switches back to his bow and fires an arrow. He confidently states that this will end the fight, but he's wrong and the crowned beast grabs his arrow. Greed determines that Fate will just have to fight it up close, but they are shocked when the crowned beast prepares a move called Ruinous Strike. Greed explains that it can penetrate armor to shatter bone and pulverize organs. They pull back as they have to dodge a different attack, but still end up getting hit by the shockwave. The attack sends Fate into a river where Greed desperately calls for him to wake up. A kobold soldier moves in for a final attack, but its arms get sliced off, and we find that Fate was just pretending to be out cold. Fate fights another kobold but easily defeats it, once again activating his gluttony skill. Greed explains that Fate should be able to use his first level hidden art now. It will cost Fate 10% of his current stats, but it will allow him to put a quick end to the fight. Fate agrees to it, and Greed's bow transformation gets a huge upgrade. Fate fires the powerful shot, and the crown beast tries to counter it, but it's no hope and he is defeated. Fate thinks that the shot might have been a bit overkill, and his gluttony skill is activated once again. However, Fate is in agonizing pain. He can't understand why, and Greed explains that he overloaded from devouring a soul of higher quality for the first time. Greed desperately tells him to hold it in, since if he doesn't, it'll be even worse than his starvation state. Fate does his best to fight it, but the pain is unbearable. The next day, warriors arrive to find the aftermath of the massacre, and wonder if it was done by magic arrows. Roxy is there as well, and she wonders who could have done the massive damage. The next day, we see that Fate is fine, as Roxy tells her mother about what they saw. Roxy remembers that she saw that Gallia girl the other day, and thinks that she might have been the one that eliminated the monsters. Fate sighs in relief as he is glad that he isn't a suspect. Roxy's ready to return to the capital, and her mother thinks about how happy Roxy looks when she's talking to Fate. Later, Aisha asks Fate to stay by her daughter's side to support her, but we already know that Fate is a simp and he was going to do that anyway. She explains that she doesn't need him to become a holy knight or anything, because what's most valuable about him is his desire to help Roxy. She then kind of insults Fate as she compares herself to him. She says that she never had any skill to speak of, but was still able to support her husband. She doesn't have much time left, which is why she wants Fate to support Roxy in her place, and she tells him to take his time to think about it, so he does. On the way home, he thinks about if he's worthy of something like that, since he's hiding such a big secret from the world. That night, Fate is shocked to see that his eye is still red, and he feels an uncontrollable hunger, even though he just slaughtered a bunch of goblins. Greed explains that goblins won't satisfy his monstrous hunger anymore, but Fate points out that there are no stronger monsters around. Time is running out for him to find something that will satiate his growing hunger, so Greed tells him that he needs to decide what comes next. Sometime later, Fate sits at the bar hiding his red eye, and he decides that he's not worthy to stand at Roxy's side. The gossiping old man walks in, talking about how Hato is going to join the hunt, and Fate is shocked to hear this. It's clear that Hato is hated, as the old man wishes that they would send him to Gallia instead to become monster food. The bartender says people like Hato usually stick to where it's safest, and some other poor soul is going to end up on the Gallia expedition. This shocks Fate as well, as he can't believe they're already planning another expedition so soon after Mr. Mason's death. The others are upset about it too, and the old man just hopes that the worst case scenario doesn't come true. Unfortunately, it does come true, as we see that the Holy Knights have gathered and they select Hato's replacement for the Gallia expedition. Afterwards, at the capital, Roxy shockingly tells her father that she has been assigned to the expedition to Gallia. However, Fate arrives and pleads for her not to go. If she goes now, she might never come back. It's too late though, Roxy has decided to go and there's nothing he can do about it. Fate can only watch her leave and thinks about what else the old man said. He said that the Hart family is a nuisance for the Valerics and other Holy Knights. Rumor has it that they were the ones that arranged for the expedition to Gallia. We then see that the Valerics are celebrating, as they will soon be rid of the nuisance. The two other siblings leave the rest to Hato, as the two of them are off to a place called Tenburn. Hato wants Raphael to tell him about his big secret involving immortality. However, Raphael just tells him that he is counting on Hato to deal with the Lich. That night, Fate thinks about how he can't overturn official orders and he can't stop Roxy. However, he won't let the Holy Knights treat people like trash and cause more suffering. We then shockingly see that Fate has decided how he wants to satisfy his hunger, as he was waiting for Hato. Hato is glad to finally meet Corpse, and Fate turns to him with his glowing red eye. Hato has his very eager men attack first, but Fate is so much more powerful than they are now that they don't even look like they're moving to him. Fate then absolutely destroys these bums, as Hato can only watch in shock. Fate turns to the leftovers with murderous intent, and the rest of Hato's group run for their lives. Hato is clearly terrified, but still talks a big game, as he says that he won't let Corpse make a fool of him. He calls Corpse a monster and vows not to let him get away with what he has done. Fate then shockingly removes his mask to reveal his real identity, and Hato's stunned as he wonders how trash like him could be this powerful. Fate has no reason to explain a single thing, and Hato does his best to keep from wetting himself. Hato composes himself a bit to remind Fate that he is the second son of the Valeric family, the great Holy Knight Hato Valeric. Unfortunately for him, Fate isn't the guy he used to bully, and Fate tells Hato to show him his Holy Knight powers that he is so proud of. Fate checks his stats and explains that Hato has the Holy Sword technique, the special skill needed in order to become a Holy Knight. Fate wonders how someone like Hato ended up with it, and asks Greed if he will be able to shatter a Holy Sword. Greed is confident he's way better than Hato's garbage sword, and tells our boy to swing to his heart's content. The foolish Hato starts getting confident again out of nowhere as he calls Fate dumb for getting in the range of his sword. He uses an immense attack but is absolutely stunned when Fate ends up behind him. Hato desperately tries to attack Fate, but our boy just slices his sword in half like it's butter. Hato can't believe his holy sword was destroyed so easily, and Fate gives him back the other piece. Our boy is an absolute powerhouse now compared to the weakling he was before, and is now the one telling Hato to pick something up off the ground. Hato is at a complete loss for words, as I'm sure he has soiled himself, and Fate reminds him that he is a holy knight, so he shouldn't want to run away so badly. Hato trips over, riddled with fear, so Fate calls him pathetic and forces him up. Fate plans to teach Hato a lesson and reminds him of when Hato once told him that defiant dogs need strict discipline. The horrified Hato knows what's coming and begs Fate to stop. Fate just ignores him and introduces his face to the side of a mountain. Fate thrashes this dude through the forest, leaving Hato almost unrecognizable, and Hato begs for him to stop. Fate can't believe that this guy could beg for mercy since he treats people like insects. If that wasn't bad enough, Fate's precious Roxy is now heading into danger because of filth like him. Hato makes another desperate attempt to beg for him to stop, but our boy is beyond angry at this point and sends this dude flying high in the air. Fate exchanges his stats again so Greed can transform into the Big Bow and releases a devastating attack. It's never been more obvious how insanely powerful Fate is, as his attack has left this great holy knight without any limbs. Hato wonders why Fate would possibly leave him alive and now begs for him to just end his life. Fate has questions first, and Hato already knows he wants to know about Roxy. He reveals that Roxy actually volunteered to go on the expedition to Gallia. She said that if her life could save even a single citizen of the kingdom, then it would be worth it. I guess Hato thought it over and decided that life without limbs wouldn't be so bad because he now begs Fate to spare his life. He promises to get Roxy's Gallia expedition cancelled and tells Fate not to do something stupid. Fate prepares to end his life, and Hato picks the absolute worst thing to say as he tells Fate that getting revenge for Roxy's sake would be a big mistake. Fate tells him to shut up and declares that he is doing this for himself. He plunges his blade straight through Hato's chest and says that it is his revenge. With Hato now dead, Fate's Gluttony skill activates, and he receives the skill Holy Sword Technique. Greed points out that this technically makes Fate a holy knight now, but Fate knows that the capital would never accept that, and angrily states that he would want to be one anyway. Greed explains that Fate can access his second level, so Fate accepts, because the idea of Hato's stats being inside him makes him want to puke. Greed transforms yet again and reveals that he can now become a great scythe. It doesn't just look cool, the curse embedded in the blade can cut through anything. This is great and all, but our simp wishes that it could cut short Roxy's trip to Gallia. Elsewhere, Roxy prepares for the expedition and puts the gem Fate gave her around her neck. Fate can't do anything about her leaving and can only watch with the background characters. Roxy tries to tell everyone not to be so sad and explains that 3 years will be over in no time. Roxy makes her way to Fate, where he tries to tell her how he feels. However, he stops when he reminds himself that he is a monster and he is no good for her. Roxy knows they will see each other again, and the two say their goodbyes. Afterwards, Haru gives Fate the recommendation letter that Roxy left him. As long as Fate is employed at a lord's manor, then the Valerics won't be able to hurt him. Fate realizes that Roxy worried about him till the very end, but he decides that he will reject the letter. Of course, Haru is shocked, so Fate explains that he's going to make his way as a warrior from now on. That night though, we find out the truth. Fate tells Greed that if he can't stop Lady Roxy from going to Gallia, then he will at the very least support her. Fate begins his journey to Gallia, and we see that a girl is watching him as she says that things are shaping up nicely. Sometime later, Roxy gives a speech to all the troops joining the expedition. She states that they will all need to do their best to destroy the divine dragon that has awoken after a millennium of silence. After that, Roxy is glad to see that a girl named Miria and a guy named Mugen will be joining as well. Miria points out how this guy is just another reckless oddball looking for a chance to test their strength against the dragon. This muscled up dude can't deny that, and Roxy calms him down. Mugen explains that he actually volunteered because of Roxy's father, and he just wants to avenge him. Roxy wonders if his family is against him going to Gallia, but he explains that his daughter named Rain couldn't care less, and just wanted him to bring back some Gallian relics. The two begin bickering again, and Roxy has a good laugh as they're all becoming friends. Elsewhere, we find that Mugen's daughter Rain is a researcher, and she's in a lab filled with goblin body parts. She is told that certain ones come from the attacks by the Lich called Corpse, and it is pointed out that the arrow wounds aren't normal at all. She discovers that they are the magic arrows of the Black Sword, one of the weapons of mortal sin. The weapons of mortal sin are made of a material that can manipulate magic power at a high level. Not much else is known about these weapons, but Rain is certain that if they can control magic power, then they would expand the possibility spectrum for skills. The wielder would be extremely dangerous, but she would very much like to see one of these weapons. Fate arrives at Tetra, the hub for shipping headed towards the royal capital, a city of merchants where the best goods in the south are gathered. Greed is surprised to hear that Fate has been there before. Fate just says that he simply passed through, but a memory shows him getting hit by stones. Fate is then told that the carriage won't be leaving for Gallia till the next day, and as he leaves, Greed makes another one of his smart aleck comments about Roxy. Fate tells him to shut up and has to apologize to the carriage guy when he thinks he was talking to him. Fate decides to go eat some meat, and we see that some guy is asking a group of warriors for their help. The money he is offering for their help isn't enough, so these jerks bully the poor guy. Fate arrives to easily wipe the floor with these guys, and shockingly greets his old friend Set. A look into the past shows that Fate used to live there, and his constant stomach growling would always get him beat up. We also see that Fate was very close to his father, who was a warrior. However, Fate's father would eventually die. The other villagers pointed out that Fate's father named Dean had the spear technique skill, so the village chief kept him around. However, Fate's skill was useless, so no one was willing to take care of him. These cold-hearted bastards decided that it would be best to just run him out of the village while calling him worthless garbage. Little did they know that treating a kid like garbage just moments after his father died would be the perfect villain origin story. Luckily for Set, Fate isn't a villain, as Fate is now the person he must ask to help his village. Fate is clearly not moved by this guy's tears and explains that Set is the son of the village chief who exiled him. Greed urges Fate to help, but only because his gluttony skill needs to be fed, and the monsters attacking the guy's village would be perfect. Fate agrees to help and thinks about how even though he still resents the people, he still has memories of his father there. They arrive at the village, but the village chief is disappointed to see that his son has brought back the useless weakling he exiled. Set tries to vouch for Fate's strength after seeing him easily defeat the warriors, but the chief doesn't want to hear it, and decides that they will just have to find warriors the next day. The chief's lackeys point out that screams have been heard from a nearby forest. The monsters are getting close and they don't have much time left, so the chief decides that they will just use Fate as a sacrifice to buy them some time. Fate has clearly had enough of this fool's insults, but Set begs him to calm down. At Set's house, Fate learns that Set's wife was ended by the monsters. Set regrets growing up thinking that his father was always right, and explains that he only started to get his act together when his daughter was born. Set then explains that the monsters first showed up about a month ago. The witnesses say that there's more than one, and they can apparently fly. They're nothing like the monsters the village has had to deal with before, so that is why they decided to hire some warriors. Just then, Fate's stomach growls loudly, and Set goes to get him some food. Fate asks Greed if he has any idea what they're dealing with, and he assumes that they are most likely gargoyles. They are sort of clever, so they start by doing probing attacks to see how humans react, and when the time is right, the entire pack attacks in a swarm. Set's daughter introduces herself and gives Fate a piece of candy to settle his stomach. They decide to play for a bit, and this kid shows that she might be the final boss, as she easily beats our boy in arm wrestling. Fate then begins to eat the food Set brought him, but is shocked when he suddenly feels tired and faints. Set is surprised as well, and the little girl explains that she just gave him some candy that her grandpa gave her. This silly little kid has no clue what she just did, and Set begins to realize that his father was really serious about sacrificing Fate. Greed uses all this information to deduce that that candy was poisoned, and Set tries to wake Fate up. There is no time for that though, as he hears screams nearby, and discovers that the monsters have made it to the village. The monsters waste no time, and instantly start terrorizing the village as Greed tries to wake Fate up. He instantly gives up though when he realizes that it's useless because Fate was all drugged up. The village is quickly being torn to pieces, and we see Set's father running through the streets. He is calling out for Fate, but only so they can use him as a sacrifice, and he ends up meeting his own fate as he is eaten by a monster. Luckily, Set manages to make an antidote and wakes Fate up. Fate has no clue where he even is, but Set fills him in and apologizes for his stupid father's actions. Fate heads outside where he sees the nightmarish scene with monsters causing chaos everywhere. They are attacked, and Greed points out that they will have a really hard time if the monsters just keep taking shots at them from above. A quick check of their stats reveals that they are level 27 with Fireball as their skill. Greed is certain that they don't have a chance the way things are now, so he tells Fate to transform him into the Scythe. Fate does just that and instantly uses it on a Fireball. He is surprised when he thinks that the Scythe didn't work, but Greed explains that it did cut the magic, but the fire that it causes is a whole separate issue. The monsters seem to realize this as Greed explains that they are going to cover the area in fire instead of just attacking Fate directly. Fate refuses to be taken lightly though, and uses an incredible attack that slices through every single dragon with one slice. His Gluttony skill is activated and he earns the Fireball skill. Unfortunately, the fight isn't over yet as the leader of the monsters remains. This giant behemoth is level 47 and its skills are Fireball and Fire Resistance. Greed, as useful as ever, points out that the giant monster is going to close in on him to hit him with its Fireball, and that will be his best chance to bring it down. Fate heard him loud and clear as the beast approaches, so Fate slices the thing right down the middle. Another victory means that his Gluttony skill activates again, raising his level and earning him the skill Fire Resistance. The next morning, Set sadly says that most of the villagers perished, including his father, so the village is finished. As if this guy wasn't depressed enough, Fate piles on and points out that the soil there is no longer healthy, and they will never be able to grow anything there ever again. Set is amazed to see that Fate can use the skill Identify, and wonders why Fate risks his life as a warrior when he could easily make a living using his Identify skill. Fate thinks about how his Gluttony skill is one that defies divine law, and answers Set by saying that he has no choice but to fight. Set then shockingly tells Fate to hit him right in the face, because he is a masochist and he wants to pay for what he did. Of course, Fate is shocked, but Greed encourages Fate to let the guy have it, since he really needs it to help him feel better. Set is actually pretty surprised when Fate doesn't even hesitate. He tells the guy to clench his teeth and clocks him right in the face. Set thanks him for making things right, and the two say their goodbyes. Fate heads home to see his dad, who went to go get the milk in heaven. He thinks about how as bad as this village was, he's going to hate to see it go. He will always have his memories with his father though, so he tells his pops that he's going to be fine from now on. Elsewhere, Roxy is informed that they are approaching a place called Lanchester, and she is warned about the Lord of Lanchester. The useless Mugen doesn't explain any further though, and simply tells her that she will find out when they get there. Sometime later, we find that Fate is being paid 3 gold coins to guard some guy in his wagon. The guy is worried that Fate might not be a great fighter, especially since he caught our boy almost falling asleep. But Fate explains that while he may not look it, he can fight pretty decently. This might soon be tested as a group stops the carriage to explain that the road is closed. These jerks tell the man to leave everything of value behind if he wants to live, but Fate reveals himself. Greed hilariously points out that Fate should have asked for more money, and Fate points out how his greedy sword sure lives up to his name. The cart driver seems to have lost his mind as he begs Fate to save him since he has a wife and kids and he needs to bring the milk back home. The bandits see this as a sign of weakness and prepare to plunder, but a random attack sends them flying sky high. Greed says that he only knows of one person who could pull off such a powerful attack, and we see that it's the girl from the other day. She tells Fate that he owes her for the cobalt she let him have, and she asks if they can give her a ride. This girl ends up tipping the entire carriage the second she steps on, and she must tell her insanely heavy weapon called Sloth to return to normal. The girl surprisingly knows that Fate has the Gluttony skill, as she calls him Fate of Gluttony, and she reveals that she knows because she has a skill of Deadly Sin too. She is surprised that Fate doesn't know about the skills of Deadly Sin, and Greed begins to casually whistle when she says that Greed should have told him. She introduces herself as Mine of Wrath, and her stomach begins to growl just like Fate's does. Mine scarfs down most of Fate's jerky, so he has to beg her to stop just as they arrive at their location. In town, a guy rescues a girl from some terrifying beast, and he introduces himself as Rudolph, the Lord of Lanchester. The driver points out that it seems like Rudolph is preparing to welcome the expedition to Gallia, and Fate is shocked since that means Roxy is coming. Greed has a gut-busting laugh as he points out how Fate was desperately chasing after her, and he ended up passing her by. The driver pays up, but Mine takes the money, pointing out that she was the one that rescued him. The boys decide to find a place to stay first, but Mine is exhausted and falls asleep right there. Fate ends up having to carry her, and Greed explains that she isn't much of a morning person. Fate wonders how Greed knows so much about her, but Greed pretends to be a non-talking sword again as he goes completely silent. People are pretty nice in this town apparently, as some random dudes greet Fate, but he notices a strange mark on the back of their necks. Fate is then told he can't enter a part of town unless he is a citizen, and he notices that the guards have a different mark than the others. Some other people have different marks as well, so Greed assumes that it's most likely different social classes. The people don't even seem to mind, so Greed determines that the citizens must really love Rudolph. Elsewhere, we find that Rudolph is pretty ruthless as he punishes a couple people for not behaving the way he wants. The whole point of them acting so polite is to demonstrate the superiority of the Lanchester family to the Hart family. This guy is out of his mind as he slices one of these people up, and he punishes the other for running off during a monster hunt. The guards realize that he has done 2 executions on the same day, so his behavior is getting worse. Our group finds a place to stay, and Greed finally reveals that Mine is an old acquaintance that he just keeps running into, and the same goes for her weapon, Sloth. Sloth is a weapon just like Greed, a weapon of mortal sin. Greed thinks Fate is ready, so he explains what the skills of Deadly Sin are. pride, envy, lust, sloth, greed, wrath, and gluttony. These skills were born by defying the laws put forth by the divine. That is why they are called the skills of deadly sin and weapons of mortal sin. Among them, gluttony is particularly sinful for having the potential to disrupt the limits of the divine system of leveling. Fate thinks about how once gluttony tastes souls, there is no stopping it, and that's his punishment. Greed points out that they all have to pay in one way or another, and the same goes for mine. Fate still can't understand why he was the one that ended up with this skill. He always got mocked, made a fool of, for a useless skill that just makes him hungry all the time. And just when he thought he gained some power, it turned out that he needs to keep killing to survive. Fate gets upset as he wonders what good is such a power, but Greed urges him to calm down. Emotional disturbance is never a good thing, but it could be extremely costly for Fate. This is because if Fate's mind isn't strong, Gluttony will take it over in an instant. For this reason, Fate needs to get strong enough to resist. Greed reveals that the trick is to sustain a state of near starvation, so Fate instantly wants to go practice. To do this, they head outside, where Greed tells him not to satisfy Gluttony all at once, and the goal is to get his fill slowly. Their prey this time is a Sandman, so Greed has Fate cast the fireball spell before he fires his arrow. This arrow does insane amounts of damage as the giant monster is instantly evaporated. Fate's Gluttony skill consumes the monster's soul, but like always, it begins to desperately crave more. More Sandmen appear, causing Fate's hunger to grow so much that it causes him physical pain, but Greed reminds him to hang in there. Fate can barely fight back the urge to devour more souls, and he realizes that he has a long night ahead of him. Back at the inn, Mine wakes up starving and finds a poster that states that whoever defeats the sand golem will be rewarded. A mysterious man explains that not even Sir Rudolph can slay the sand golem, but if it isn't defeated, only death awaits. Back outside, Fate eliminates another Sandman, but he has gotten the hang of controlling the hunger between souls. It's not easy though, as he compares it to only drinking one sip of water at a time in a desert. They are done training for the night, so it's time to finally satisfy Gluttony. The timing works out perfectly as Fate smells the scent of a crowned beast nearby, and it will make a fine main dish for the night. We see that his main dish is the sand golem, and it's attacking some people. Fate arrives to claim the beast for himself, but the people clearly don't know who they are talking to, as they tell him that he won't be able to beat the thing on his own. Greed wonders if Fate is playing hero again, but our boy says he isn't, and he is just getting his fill. This giant sand thing is an insane level 60, and it shows its powerful attack, but Fate counters it with his fire arrow. The arrow lands, but Fate is pushed back, and this thing uses its sandstorm attack. The all-knowing Greed warns that once it pulls Fate in, it will crush him with rocks. So Fate decides that he will just have to cut through the monster and its spell. He transforms Greed into the scythe to do just that, and prepares to finish it off. However, the monster's core escapes into the sand, so Fate switches to the big bow. Greed explains that he will need 20% of Fate's stats this time to get to the core, so Fate agrees and throws some fire on top of all that as well. This new attack is so powerful that it not only destroys the core, but it erupts from the surface, and Fate's Gluttony skill steals the sandstorm attack. The people he rescued are amazed by the performance, as they have never seen anyone with such power, but point out that Fate is a bit shady looking. They introduce themselves, and Fate just goes with his given nickname to introduce himself as Corpse. The group is surprised to see that Fate hardly has any equipment, so he asks Greed if he should get some. Greed points out that Fate doesn't need it at all. He has the ability to steal enemy skills and increase his own stats. Normal people can't do that, so they are the ones that need equipment. The next morning, Mime prepares to hunt the sand golem and becomes furious when Fate reveals that he already took it down. Fate goes to collect the reward, but Mime thinks he is lame for wearing a mask. Fate explains that he defeated the beast as Corpse, so he had to collect the reward as Corpse too. Just then, Sir Rudolph arrives to greet the man who defeated the sand golem. He says that Corpse will be serving him from now on, and he has no right to refuse. Fate is a bit confused, but the guy says that he has no choice, since when a holy knight makes a decision, others must simply obey. Mine isn't having any of it though, and explains that Corpse was hers first. Rudolph disrespects this girl and tells her to go home to her mommy, but Mine teaches him a lesson by sending him out a brand new exit in the building. Fate instantly realizes that this will be a huge problem for them, and decides that they need to get out of town while they have a chance. Thanks for watching my recap. Subscribe and ring the notification bell for future parts.